Let's say you ordered takeout last night. Nothing fancy, just noodles in one of those foam containers. You toss it in the trash after you're done with your food without even thinking anything of it, like you've done 100 times before, because that's what happens when you order takeout. But the container could break into microplastics, wash into a river, and end up inside a sea turtle, a marine mammal, a seabird, any kind of animal. It's not going to decompose because that's not what it does. It won't be recycled, and it may harm ocean life for decades, oftentimes leaching chemicals into the body, including not only just regular animals that you see like seals, seabirds, and sea turtles, but also humans. In this episode, we're going to talk about the journey of foam, those styrofoam containers that we get from takeout places and other places, and why it's time to stop using them altogether. We're going to be talking to Oceana's Christy Leavitt, who is the campaign manager for Oceana on plastics, especially talking about plastic foam. And there's a new report that Oceana produced called Plastic Foam Needs to Go. We're going to talk about that report and why it should concern you today and your health. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is a podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about how campaigns work to get certain things passed in legislation, whether it's on the federal, the state, or local levels. There are people out there working for organizations who are working very, very hard to ensure that they are protecting not only the health of the planet, but also your health, especially in this case. We have Christy Leavitt from Oceana, who's a campaigner that works on foam, styrofoam containers, and why they need to go, why there needs to be a ban on this type of plastic. And we talk about the effects on the health of animals, the health of the environment, as well as our own health. So lots of things to do. And at the end, there's a great call to action where you can help out. And if you want to help out more and learn more about how you can be guided to help the ocean and live for a better ocean, I would love for you to join the Undertow. It's an ocean community that we are creating online, myself and two of my amazing co-founders. And we are building this community with wave makers, individuals who are driving for ocean change, and we are going to help you better protect the ocean. All you have to do is go to speakupforblue.com/join the Undertow to join. That's speakupforblue.com/join the Undertow. It's on a wait list right now. We're building the app out. It should come very, very soon, within the next month or so. I'm very excited to release this. You'll get access to me. You'll get access to my co-founders, Serena and Amanda, and a bunch of wave makers as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for you to do that. No algorithms, no regular social media sites. This is just a community app for ocean lovers like yourself. Speakupforblue.com/join the Undertow. Let's get into the episode. Here's my interview with Christy Leavitt from Oceana, talking about the campaign to ban plastic foam so that we don't have to deal with the consequences in our environment and in our bodies. Enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you after. Hey, Christy, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about styrofoam in the ocean?
I am, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you on, Christy. I know this is the first time we've actually met, but to have someone from Oceana on the podcast is such a delight. We've had people on from Oceana Canada before. I've had people on from Oceana, but it's been a while, and it was just so much fun to have, because I know the amazing work that you guys do, and you guys do such a plethora of work. It's such a wide variety of work, not only in fisheries, but in plastic pollution, and it's so important to discuss. And I'm really delighted that you're here, that we're going to be able to discuss that. We're going to be focusing on plastic foam today, like styrofoam, and really focusing in on those styrofoam containers, that takeout containers and stuff that we get that we don't even realize. And I think a lot of us in when we go through our everyday life, we don't question it, because just, we go take out. Everybody, we're all on the move, and we're going quickly, and we get this takeout, and it's the container that it comes in. And, you try and tell people, hey, why are you using plastic foam? But sometimes they're like, that's what we can afford. That's the way we do things. And so that happens. And so it's tough to really think about what we can do to make it better. So we're going to talk about the new report that Oceana released called Plastic Foam, How It Needs to Go. And I want to get into sort of the nitty gritty about it all. But before we do, Christy, I want to get to know you a little bit, and my audience to get to know you a little bit. So why don't you let us know who you are and what you do?
Great. Well, it is such a pleasure to be here. So I'm Christy Leavitt. I work with Oceana in the U.S. I am our U.S. Plastics Campaign Director. And so what that means is I run our campaigns here in the U.S. to stop the production and use of unnecessary single-use plastics. And my background is that I've been working on environmental issues for a couple of decades now, working on a whole variety of issues, including oceans protections, but also clean air, clean water, protecting open spaces, working on climate issues, and all of that focused on either state or national level policies, and had lots of good wins along the way, and some losses too, as it happens. But overall, working to make progress so that our air is cleaner, our waters are cleaner, and everything's better for our health and the environment. And started at Oceana about 6 years ago when we launched the plastics campaign here in the U.S. So have been here almost from the beginning, and a few staff working on it when we first started working on plastics, but launched the campaign in the U.S. And we've worked not only on national level policy, which is really Oceana's focus, but also state and local policies to reduce the production and use of single-use plastics.
Wow. Awesome. I mean, it's such a big undertaking when you think about it. It doesn't matter who the government is. Obviously, sometimes it's a little harder than others, depending on the government, of course. But in your background, in terms of like getting here and working on campaigns, when you first started in the field of oceans, did you ever think that this is what you were going to be doing, is working on campaigns? Because like when I first started, I didn't even know this was a job. When I first started, like was like a campaign director or someone who works on campaigns. It's obviously a very important aspect of it, but did you expect to work in this line of work?
Well, actually, I came about it the other way, where really when I graduated from college, what I wanted to do was to work on campaigns. I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I was really, I was into environmental issues. I went to college in Los Angeles. I was into impacts on the, pollution, impacts on people and the environment and the coast. And so I was most interested in continuing to live in Los Angeles and make change there, but I knew I needed to learn how to do that. So I worked for an organization called the Student Perks for a good number of years. I learned those skills about doing organizing work and learning how to make change on policy. And that was state level policy and national level policy. So really what I wanted to learn how to do was to make that change that makes a big impact, and organizing the public. So not only getting the policy right and the facts right, but organizing the public to get them engaged in the process too. And so I was pretty open about environmental issues that I worked on. And as I was saying, over the years, worked on everything from climate to protecting forests to ocean issues, and still really excited about all of those issues, and have always come at it from a organizing and public policy change end of it. And then there was this opportunity with Oceana to work on plastics and oceans, and the same question of, did I ever think I'd work on plastics and oceans? No. I think 20 years ago we didn't really know the extent of the problem of plastics, and we've been learning a lot, and it includes so many different things, from oceans to protecting the animals in the oceans and the harm that caused, the impacts on people to the impacts on climate. So all of that comes together with plastics. But I definitely did not think a couple decades ago that I would be working on this, but I'm really excited to be here doing it.
Yeah, and to be honest, I see a lot more posts. I've actually curated my LinkedIn page to be all job posts, because I share job posts for like the careers for people. And I noticed there's a lot of jobs, especially with Oceana, but even just with a lot of organizations similar to Oceana, whether it's in forestry or whether it's in agriculture, or it doesn't matter, right? There's a lot of campaign directors, or somebody like a marine campaigner or plastics campaigner or things like that. I see those jobs come up quite a bit. As someone, like, I went to school for science. A lot of people that listen to this podcast go to school for science or marine science, marine biology. Like, what suited you for this job, and what skills really suit people for this type of campaigns type job, like leading campaigns or taking part in campaigns?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the great things about doing campaign work is that people come from all different backgrounds. So whether you went through not only college but then got
Mm-hmm.
an advanced degree in a particular science, or
Mm-hmm.
you didn't, or even if you went to law school, or you have a degree in something else, all of that ultimately can lead you to doing this type of campaign work, and you'll do it in slightly different ways based on your expertise and experience,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely a set of skills that you can learn, and I learned it by doing it. So I learned how to do things like read policy, to run a press conference, to organize a
Right.
coalition of or other organizations, to go and meet with your local elected officials, or your here in the US members of Congress, or
Mm-hmm.
your state legislators. All of that are ultimately quite learnable skills regardless of your background. It's, I think the biggest thing is an interest in doing that and in making change through policy. And one of the great things about Oceana is that we have people who have all of those different expertise. So my expertise might be in running the campaign, but I work with a whole bunch of staff with a variety of different skills. So we start, as with many organizations, but we definitely really focus on starting with the facts. So we want to make
Right.
sure
Of
we've got the
course.
science on our side. So we've got a scientist who works specifically on plastics issues. We've got policy staff who spend their days up talking to members of Congress and their staff and the administration. We've got lawyers on staff. We also have our field representatives who are based in states around the US, particularly coastal states, who are building up that political support on the ground,
Hmm.
just getting regular, ordinary people engaged in our campaign efforts, plus then people who have some power locally who might be able to influence what Congress is doing. And it's
Right.
really that, for Oceana, that mix of the science, the policy, the legal aspects, the grassroots support, and then being able to communicate that to the public. So I think one of the really most important skills to learn along the way and to be able to do this type of work effectively is to take what are sometimes really complicated scientific issues and problems, or even solutions, and be able to
Right.
explain that to regular people who are not spending their days looking at what's happening to the oceans, or what's happening to the air, or what's happening to the animals and wildlife.
Yeah.
So being able to really break that down to people, and I'm sure in your role here you
Yeah,
you
for
do that a
sure.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so funny too, because sometimes when you don't think of a job, like a particular job, say you go through school and you're not thinking about working on campaigns, of course, as we mentioned before, it's difficult to figure out, like, what do I need to do this? This sounds like a really good opportunity, and a really good way to get into conservation is to work on these campaigns and really make a change and really make a difference on policy, building up those relationships with government representatives at different levels, and so forth. And there's so many, even within like the campaign sort of avenue, and career sort of path, there are different levels within it, from interns and all the way to like sort of like a junior campaigner, and then a senior, and then like you said, the field representatives as well. And everybody seems to enjoy their jobs. Like, I know people who have worked in the field in campaigning, and for Oceana in particular, and they've been doing it for like 9 or 10 years, and they absolutely love it. And they get out into the field, and they're talking to people, and they're going out on boats, and like doing all these photo ops and stuff. And I think it's really great. Greenpeace is also, an organization that's known to do campaigning, and they're a little bit more activism and stuff, but it's just a different way of looking at it. Now, you've mentioned you've worked in a lot of different um, almost realms, let's just say. So the marine, the forestry, what drives you to choose the path that you've taken, like to choose the type of campaigns that you work on? What has been that driving factor for you? Because I've talked to scientists where they're just like, they're the researchers, they're driven by a specific question. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that the topic is a certain animal. It's more of like, what is that ecological function that drives this animal to do a particular behavior or a particular ecological motion or function, compared to another animal that does the same thing. For you, what is that driver to choose the campaigns that you want to work on, or to apply for a job to work on the campaigns that you want to work on?
right? I'm sure that has changed over time. So
Right.
when I'm first starting, I grew up in California.
Right.
I didn't live on the coast, but lived near the coast. The mountains are amazing. The parks are amazing. So there's definitely, a connection to nature and a variety of types of nature. That was a strong interest. And I think, I still definitely have that. I live in a city, but I love going out to explore our national parks. I love going to the coast. I love looking, going to all sorts of places.
Yeah.
So I think, the connection to nature. I also think over time we've found more and more problems. So
That's true.
when I was in school, climate change was not a huge problem that we talked about a lot, but it is now. And so I think, so climate is a big driver for me overall. And plastics definitely plays into that. The oceans are being impacted by that. So that is one of the big things. But I think sort of at the core of it, I've got two kids they're no longer little kids. They're medium-sized kids now, but they, I want them to live in a world that there is clean air, clean water, that there are the oceans, that the oceans are filled with all sorts of wildlife, that there's people who can sustain their livelihoods by relying on the oceans, that all of that exists not just for the next 5 to 10 years, but it is for decades and decades from now, if not centuries. I want my kids to grow up and have a world where there is clean air, clean water, oceans. I want their kids to be able to do that. So I think, as a parent, that's a big driver. But I also beyond me, I want to make sure that other people's kids can do that too. So that it's, I look at my kids and what I want them to be able to do, but I also want people around the country, around the world, to be able to have those same things too: clean air, clean water, open spaces, oceans, all of that.
Well, and we know how much it plays a role in our overall health, not only physical, but mental health as well. I mean, Jay Nichols, I always mention him in probably every episode that I can with his Blue Mind book, and the fact that it helps us to have the ocean in good health, just in general. Just if we can keep that in good health, keep our planet in good shape, then we can do it. And some of the stuff that you campaign for, to you and I, it's like basic needs. This is like, we're just asking for, pretty much like, let's just keep the environment as healthy as possible. And let's like not have as much negative influence on it. But it's such a big thing to do. The campaigns, there's a reason why there are campaigns that we do, that you participate in, to get these plastic, like foam and styrofoam, out of circulation, because they can be bad for our planet. They can be bad for our health. So I think it's really interesting. I love the driver for that. I think it's really cool. And obviously it evolves, right? I was expecting that it evolves as you go through, and certain things interest you, and as your kids grow up and you start to see the effect, like I have two teenage daughters, one going into university next year for wildlife and conservation, so I'm like very excited about that.
Very cool.
Not marine biology, but nobody's perfect. It's fine. But it's kind of cool to see. And we discuss a lot of some of the issues, just like, I don't understand why this is an issue. Like, this seems to be just basic, but it is, and then we have to make a case for it, and we have to campaign on these things. So I think that's really cool. Let's get into the plastics, because this is what we're here for. In the styrofoam, there's a report that Oceana put out called "Plastic Foam Needs to Go." It's a really well written report, very easy to read for anybody who wants to pick it up. And I'll put the link in the show notes so that people can get access to it. Speaking of drivers, what was the driver to write this report?
Well, so overall, Oceana is working to reduce the production and use of single-use plastics. And we're taking a step back. We're doing that because single-use plastics and packaging makes up about 40% of all the plastic made each year. So that's a lot. And a lot of that 40% is unnecessary. And so if we can make an impact on that, it's going to ultimately protect our oceans, because we're making less of it, and less of it's going to end up in the ocean, but it's also going to have lots of other benefits too, in terms of climate issues, in terms of other clean air and clean water issues. So that's our starting point, is taking that piece of the pie. I guess it'd be this
Yeah.
piece of the pie that way. So dealing with that part of it, there are some really problematic single-use plastics, and plastic foam is one of those. So plastic foam, it's formerly called it's formerly called expanded polystyrene, and it's, as you started the show, it's often referred to as styrofoam.
Right.
And it is something that there are good alternatives to now. There is no reason why we should be relying on this product it pollutes our environment, it creates problems for the ocean, it creates problems for people, and we can get into all of that, but it's really one of the most problematic plastics, but there simply is not a need for it.
Right.
And so we wanted to do this report to help educate people and show people that plastic foam is hazardous to our oceans and our health.
So it's always interesting when we find out that something that we've been using in general supply, in like everyday life, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is bad for us and bad for the planet. Yet we never questioned it. We just said, this is, I'm going to order my food, or I'm at a restaurant and I want to take it home. So I want to, go home with it. Oh, here's a container for it. Okay, cool. I'm not going to, even question it, put it in a container, and I'm going to go home. Why is it that styrofoam was the choice that was made in the first place to be that material to go into this mass production and be used by, millions of people around the world, billions, really?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a conscious or purposeful choice for particularly this type of plastic. There are a couple of
Right.
things for why plastic foam and other single-use plastics, they've increased the use exponentially of these products have, let me say that again. These products
Yeah.
have increased exponentially over the last 20 years.
Right.
So over half of the plastic made has been since 2004. So there's been this huge growth, and a lot of that is about moving from reusable products to a lot of single-use products. And
Gotcha.
plastic foam is pretty cheap. It's
Hmm.
pretty cheap to make, and that clearly does not include all of the environmental and health impacts built into that cost. And it's lightweight, so easy to
Hmm.
ship. So I think those are some of the things that have made it part of just common usage.
Hmm.
And it is used, as you're saying, for everything from takeout containers to go cups to soda cups. Foam coolers is one of the other uses, and
Yeah.
what we in the U.S. call packing peanuts, but other
Yes.
packaging. I don't know, packing peanuts in Canada too.
It's pretty much the same. Yeah.
So it is. So it does have its uses, but all the problems with it, both on the
Hmm.
production side and the toxic chemicals that come out of our use of it, that then has an impact on us, and then its disposal, are all totally problematic. And some of those things that might make it useful for somebody, to sell the product, are some of the problems with it. So it's really lightweight. It also
Hmm.
is brittle. So when breaks apart, it makes it, breaks up into tiny pieces that can be
Yeah.
carried really far in both the wind and the water. So it has become one of the most common forms of marine plastic pollution, as well as pollution in lakes and rivers too. And so that big expansion of its use has created lots of problems too.
Well, and if you've ever handled anything that's styrofoam related, God forbid it breaks, or you try and like break it down. It seems like it's a product just made of these tiny balls of styrofoam, and so when it breaks, these things go everywhere, and they're very difficult to clean up if you think about it, right? Like, so I'm thinking of, like,
Yep.
in my mind right now, I'm thinking of like a styrofoam cooler. If that breaks or gets crushed by something, uh, it just goes everywhere, and it's really difficult to take up every little piece. It's not like big chunks or things like that. So think of, like, when I think about that, I think about that happening at a beach. If somebody takes a cooler to a beach, it say, even if a piece like chips off, they're like, oh, no big deal. You try and pick up as much as possible, but you still get these little beads that are in the sand that eventually travels. They're lightweight. If they're not buried in the sand, they can go into the ocean, or they can go into the dunes if there are dunes in the back, and animals will eventually try and pick them up. As they think, oh, maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a sea turtle, as they're trying to get some food or something like that. If it's floating, they might just experiment and try and get it in there. And we don't think about that when it happens, because I'll have it in my driveway and it'll break and I'm like, oh, like I got to go and pick it all up and stuff. And who's going to take it? Like, what's going to be affected by this? It's on my own property. It's not going to affect anything, but birds pick it up. I've seen birds pick it up. I've seen squirrels pick it up. Animals pick this stuff up. It's harmful for these animals. It'll eventually kill them or harm their health. And I think we don't think about that. We just think, oh, it's a cooler. I can grab it, bring it to the beach or bring it to wherever on a picnic, and then I'll just throw it out because I don't want to keep it. It's very much in our convenience, for this type of work, even though there are so many other products available now. I feel like it's almost, sometimes I still wonder why we have this problem, because there's so many alternatives available for restaurants as well as for consumers, individual consumers. So, and this in your report? Is like, why is it so hard to get it out of production? Why is this so difficult?
It is primarily, it's a plastic producer. So they make this product, they want to keep selling the product. And it is, for all the reasons you said, totally problematic and harmful to animals. We could talk about some specific examples if that's helpful too. But the main reason we still have it is that the companies that produce it want to keep producing it, and they want to keep it on the market. There's countries around the world, and I think Canada too has a plan and a law to phase out single-use plastic foam. In the US, we don't have a law like that on the national level yet, but we do have state laws, and cities and counties are working to phase it out. It really should be that the companies that use and sell and distribute this, that they're doing it there on their own, and they're stop using it and using it as the coffee cup or the takeout container or the packing peanuts, but they're not doing that in all cases. And so these government policies are really important to make change on the issue and to move it on out. So that's what, if the companies aren't doing themselves, governments really need to step in and make a difference, because it is such a problem for whether it's sea turtles who are eating it, or birds that are picking it up like you were describing, or they see it floating on the ocean and they think it looks like little fish eggs. They eat it that way too. So it's really problematic for ocean animals.
I never thought of the fish egg scenario, but yeah, that makes complete sense. Obviously, there's an environmental impact to it with birds, with fish, with sea turtles, like any animal really that wants to pick this up wherever it can find. But it also affects humans as well. Like these things get into our system. How does it get into our, like, how does it affect us? Because some people are like, I'm not going to eat it. Like, why would I get it into my system? Like, what contributes to like the I guess bad health, for lack of better terminology?
Yeah, well, it is. I remember as a kid having a foam cup, and you start playing with it and you break it apart. And I'm sure there's kids around me and around the world who are have eaten foam. But even if you're at the point in your life where you're not going to eat that foam cup, plastic foam is made from a product called styrene. And styrene is toxic to the human nervous system. It's also a probable carcinogen, which what that means is it probably causes cancer in people. And it easily leaches into food and beverages. So it comes out of that plastic foam cup or your clamshell container that's holding your takeout. That chemical can leach out and into you. And one of the things about styrene is that it leaches out at even more at high temperatures. So to think of that hot cup of coffee in a foam cup, that's even more problematic, because that heat is leading to more of that styrene chemical being leached into the coffee. So it is quite ridiculous that when we are drinking a drink from a foam cup, or we're eating something from a takeout container, we could be risking our health. And in the US, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends parents avoid polystyrene plastic, which is plastic foam is a type of polystyrene. So we've got, it's a probable carcinogen. It leaches into our food and drink, And it also, pediatricians are saying, don't give this product to your children.
Right.
And all of that together seems like just something that we should say, no, we don't
Yeah.
want this. And then the other way that it can get into our body too is, we were talking about, it breaks up into those smaller and smaller pieces. Ultimately, they become microplastics
Mm-hmm.
or nanoplastics. And they and other types of polystyrene particles, they've been found in many parts of the human body, including in our brains, lungs, kidneys, blood, and reproductive systems. So it is being found in all parts of the body. Now we know a lot about the chemicals like styrene, though
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of chemicals in plastic that the producers haven't shared what those chemicals are. So there's the
Right.
chemicals are one part of the problem, and we have some more information about that, and we know it's problematic. And then the other part are the tiny bits of plastic are ending up in people. And we don't know all the impacts of that. It's a newer area where
Yeah.
science is really digging in there, but it seems problematic to have little particles of plastic throughout our bodies, whether that's in our brains or our reproductive systems or in our hearts.
And if you think about going back to chemicals leaching out into a coffee cup, if it's heated or warmed in any kind of way, you think about those particles, those plastic particles that are binding to molecules in our body, whether they be air molecules, whether they be blood molecules, those are leaching into our body. And if you extrapolate and we look at marine mammals who have had arsenic and other types of harmful metals in their lipid, in their fats, because of ingestion of plastics, a variety of plastics, not just styrofoam, and we see the effect that it has on their health. I think we can, because we are, fairly closely related, we're both mammals, we can almost extrapolate and say, hey, that this could happen to us. It could degrade our system, our health, like our body, as we go through and as we get older. And if we're certain of us, some of us are more vulnerable than others, depending on what other conditions that we have. And it'd be easy if it just didn't get into our system, if it wasn't in our supply chain, and it wasn't in anything else. So that's great. And
Yep,
you did
that's
mention
exactly
that
right.
yeah, you did mention in Canada we do have a policy. I believe, I'm not sure where it's at right now. I have to touch base with Anthony right now, because last time I spoke, there were a number of chemical companies as well as fossil fuel companies who were suing the government for aspects of the aspect of why this legislation went in, which is basically that plastic is toxic to people, is what they put in the legislation. And so there's a number of different actions that came out. One of those was to ban, I think it was 6 specific single-use
Hmm.
plastics. Styrofoam was one of those plastics, and then there's stuff to come, a registry of plastics, a tracking of plastics, and so forth. And I think they were, even though they didn't mind certain of those single use plastics being done, as Anthony mentioned from Oceana Canada, that's why I'm mentioning him. He said that they just don't want have to worry about anything in the future that could impede on their business. So it's a business decision, a lot of this stuff, of why it's being kept in. Now, the interesting thing that gets me, and obviously I know, like, if you go to the government and you say, let's put in legislation to ban these products so that they can't put them into the system, which, like, in Canada I've seen firsthand, like, I think it's been in since like 2022 or 2023, and it's phased in for certain
Yep.
products. But I've seen it in our restaurants, especially, where the takeout containers are now more like this corrugated, like paper, basically. It's almost like what boxes are made of, essentially, is what it is, but lighter. It's supposed to be better recycle, like better compostable and stuff, and which is nice to see, like, that we see that. I actually will only go to takeout places that actually have that, so I won't go anywhere else, because that's my choice. Like, that's how I'm going to choose. So I understand, like, going for government, it probably works it faster into the system. But going to businesses and saying, "Hey, look, here are some of the alternatives. Here are the prices." If somebody went into like a business, like a restaurant, say a takeout restaurant, and said, "Here are some of the alternatives. Like, what would it take for you to switch?" Like, has Oceana done any of those surveys with businesses and said, "What would it take for you to switch over to something that's better for the health of your customers, but also same price point or similar price point, and it's going to be better for you and your customers. Has Oceana ever worked at that level with businesses or had partners that did the same thing?
Yeah, we at Oceana, we haven't done that.
Okay.
So going business to business. Some coalition partners have been more engaged in that, and some of the things that we do know. So ultimately, the best solution is moving to a reusable or refillable product.
Right.
So there are some companies in the US, and if not yet, soon in Canada, hopefully, that are doing reusable takeout containers where
Right.
you can order your takeout, whether it gets delivered to you or you're picking it up, and it's going to come in a container that then you either give back to that delivery person or you can drop it off back at the restaurant where you got it, or some places have other drop-off locations. It then gets washed and cleaned and returned to the restaurant for use again. So
Yeah.
systems like that are the best.
Yes.
And then where that's not possible or doesn't exist yet, something that is a non-toxic alternative is even better, which it sounds like you found some places like that. And there are some coalition partners in the US who have looked, or some other entities in the US who have looked into it and found that switching to reuse does ultimately, you'll make your money back in the long term. So there's some upfront investments for things like if your business doesn't have a dishwasher, you'll need to invest in that. But over several years, you can break even and even go beyond that. So there are some folks who are working on that. It's not something that we're working on the business to business level. We're really focused on that government policy. But some policies that could help in that would be having some grants that could then go to support this change over to reuse. Is another.
I love that.
Another thing that could help out.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer, because it would take a lot of building relationships with businesses, and obviously that takes a long time. Plus, there's so many businesses out there that use these types of containers that it would be difficult to go to each and every one and say, hey, like, this is what we need to do. So now, we this type of knowledge is not necessarily new to a lot of people. Like, to some businesses, some manufacturers, even governments have known that styrofoam has been a problem for quite some time. Are there any efforts, like policy efforts, currently underway to change the law, either at local, state, or federal levels in the U.S.?
Yes, at all of those levels, there are policies. So in the US, states and cities are doing a lot more than we've done on the national level. There's 12 states that have passed laws that are statewide laws that reduce single-use plastic foam products. Some of those are foodware specific, some cover foodware and packing peanuts and the disposable foam coolers. We saw more that were introduced on the state level this year during legislative sessions. Some of those legislative sessions are still going on. And we also got a bill that's been introduced in Congress called the Farewell to Foam Act. And what it would do would be to phase out plastic foam foodware, packing peanuts, and disposable foam coolers around the country. And so that's been introduced in Congress, and it's gaining support, and we are spending time working on that, as well as supporting state laws and local policies too. So just last week, the city of Boston talked about passing a bill that would phase out plastic foam there too, and foodware.
That's awesome.
So we're seeing all of this. A national law would be best because it would cover the whole country, but all of these pieces definitely help.
Yeah, well, and that's always great, and like, obviously state and local levels are probably better to target these days than any other. But even before this new administration came in, were there any leaps and strides with the last administration that was in the U.S. on, because they seem to have obviously more climate friendly policies and so forth? Was styrofoam part of their agenda to clean up or to address?
So this bill had been introduced in the previous session of Congress. It didn't pass, but there's Congress is on one side and then there's the administration. The
Right.
Biden administration did several policies that were good policies to phase out not only plastic foam but other single-use plastics. And one of the first ones that they did was in 2022, where the Secretary of the Interior put in place a policy to phase out single-use plastics in our national parks and other public lands that are overseen by the Interior Department. It was on a pretty long timeline, so it was a 10-year timeline. Unfortunately, that has now been overturned by the current Secretary of the Interior, but the previous policy covered plastic foam, as well as other single-use plastics, and parks were starting to work on that. Now, that's a small but very visible part of the federal government. People in the U.S., as I know this is true in Canada too, love our national parks.
Yeah.
And we have visitors from around the world. So phasing out single-use plastic in such iconic places makes a big impact, and people would see that. The other thing that the Biden administration did was put in place a policy to phase out single-use plastics across the federal government. And that was also had a multi-year timeline, but a set of things that they wanted to do by 2027. They just put that policy in place last summer, so there wasn't significant progress made on it by the time that their administration ended. But it was, you think of it like, oh, the federal government doing something that might not be big, but the U.S. government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the entire world. So if they make a change on their purchasing and stop purchasing single-use plastics and move to other reusable and refillable products or other non-toxic products, that's going to make a big impact. So we were really excited about that policy that has been put in place. It is not moving forward at this point in time, but we're hopeful to see things like that again down the road. But in the meantime, building support in Congress and also working on state and local policies too. Because one of the cool things about this all is that we know, even from some examples in the US, when a city or a state puts in place a policy to phase out plastic foam, it makes an impact. And this is not all places have data that shows what the pollution was like in a river or in a bay ahead of time. But for example, up in Maryland, I'm in Washington, D.C., it's just north in D.C., they saw in Maryland's Inner Harbor in Baltimore, they saw an 80% reduction in the plastic foam that was collected by a big trash interceptor called Mr. Trash Wheel after their statewide foam foodware ban went into effect.
Love DC, Mr. Trash Wheel, by the way.
You do? Good.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Mr. Trash Wheel as well. Anything with googly eyes is fun.
Exactly.
We don't have Mr. Trash Wheel in DC, but we here in DC, the city put in place a single-use plastic foam ban about 10 years ago, and in the first year, there are trash traps along the Anacostia River, which runs through the city. There was a 50% reduction in plastic foam at the end of the first year. And then after 5 years, that pollution fell 88%. So it's clear when a city or a state puts in place these policies, you can see big reductions in the amount of foam that is collected by these trash collectors. And it's not just because people are being more careful with it. They're just not using as much of it because it's been phased out. So if we can get that across the country, it can make a big impact. And as your law gets implemented in Canada, that also can make a big impact. And good news from Canada, not only is it about the plastic foam, but it deals with other single-use plastics. Plastics for sure. Too. And Anthony can definitely give you an update. I think it's still. I think there's still court case, moves forward, and then there's still court cases too.
Yeah, I think the government won the appeal. I think it's still going back to court. Last time I checked, I think is what it was. So, but the law is still in place. That's what the beautiful part is. Now let's talk about campaigns. During especially at the federal level these days, it's obviously harder. We won't go into detail about that because we don't need to go into detail. the point of view of someone who campaigns, and from Oceana, who has, well, I would say, a lot of clout, in terms of bringing factual information, bringing concerns that people have, like your constituents have, on plastic pollution and styrofoam. When you go up against an administration like this, and not just the actual president administration, but when you have Congress of one party that may not make a lot, or it may not be known these days as environmental policymakers, even though back in the 70s they were the ones who put in like some of the most wonderful policies, like the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and so forth. From your perspective, how do you approach the change of an administration from the different executive levels, from the Congress, from Senate to the president, even the Supreme Court, where court cases sometimes are used to get things changed? How does Oceana approach this, and you specifically approach an administration that may not be as responsive to these types of campaigns?
Yeah, that's a good question. The starting point for me is that, and the good news within things that are more challenging, is that the public really cares about this issue, and
Mm,
that's for plastic, and that's also for other ocean issues. I obviously know more on the plastic sides, but as we've done polling year after year, there's strong support across the political spectrum.
hmm.
And on plastics in particular, just taking the foam piece of that, we released a poll earlier this year that found 78% of registered US voters support policies on the national level to reduce single-use plastic foam. And so that's not only Democratic support, it's also Republican support, it's also independent support, and that's pretty consistent with
That's
the
awesome.
polling that we've done. And that is, getting 78% of Americans to agree on anything is quite
Yeah.
remarkable. And so that's a clear sign that they care about this issue. They're concerned about the plastic foam that harms the health of ocean animals. And that polling, we asked a question about that on just concern, and found 88% of US voters were concerned about the plastic foam and the harms to ocean wildlife. So there's strong public support for this. And then the challenge there is making sure that that message gets to the decision makers. I think across party lines, there is concern about plastics.
Hmm.
There's concern about the impacts of plastics on the ocean. There's, as we learn more about microplastics and the impacts on human health, there's concern about that too. And then the challenge there is getting that concern from members of Congress, in this case, to change to action. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, one of the things that happens is that sometimes people default to the solution is recycling, because that's what we've heard for
Yes.
30,
Yes.
50, 60 years, that if we just recycled more plastic, that's going to solve
Hmm.
the problem. That's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve it for plastics overall. It's not going to solve it for plastic foam. So, of all the plastic waste created, only 9% has been recycled. The rest
Hmm.
ends up in landfills, burned in incinerators, or ends up in the environment, including the ocean. Plastic foam, even worse. The current recycling rates for that in the US are less than 1% of plastic
Yeah.
foam is recycled.
Yeah.
So there's the good part of that, as I was saying, is that people are concerned about this issue. That's the public at large, as well as our decision makers in Congress. But we need to push on the solutions, and we know it's going to take time.
Hmm.
For an administration that's not pushing strong environmental policies, it means we spend more time defending the policies that are on the books. So some of
Gotcha.
the laws that you were just mentioning, we're going back to protect the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We're
Yeah.
working to protect NOAA, which oversees a lot of the
Hmm.
oceans and the protections. And that is, it would be much better if we were it would be much better if we were able to push forward strong policies that did even more. But right now we're at the point where it's on the national level, it's a lot about defending the laws that
Right.
are on the book and finding champions and supporters in Congress
Yeah.
both political parties who are gonna do that. And where there are even more opportunities in the short term is on the state level.
Wonderful. And let's be honest too, like some of these policies don't just get written up in one day and then put it through Congress and then they're voted on and they go through and they're done like the next day. This sometimes these take years to put together. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes years for people to gain the support, like within Congress or on a federal level, even state level and even local level. And so like what I guess my question is there's no need to stop because of a specific administration may not want to put it through. You continue to bring it forward, but also knowing that at some point there's going to be somebody who's interested in this and will be the champion or champions to push it through. Correct?
Definitely so. It
Yeah.
is, we will make as much progress as we can right now and defend all the laws that we can right now. And we
Yeah.
need, the public needs to get engaged with that and support that. But it is also, this will be long term. So if we can't pass a bill to phase out plastic foam across the country this year,
Right.
we'll keep building towards next year and the year after. They'll ultimately,
Yeah.
we've built up enough support to do it. And that's why that public concern, getting people to talk to their local elected officials, whether that's their mayor or their city councilor or their member of Congress, it's so important for that concern then to change that into action.
Yeah. And let's be honest, if you put it through local and state levels and you see progress in there, that might, trigger somebody at the federal level to be like, oh, this actually worked. How did it work? Okay, let's use this aspect in this state and let's use this aspect in this state and let's put it together. So there's a lot of benefit in doing it at the different levels. Let me ask you this. This is something that I've been curious about, and I haven't seen any data on it, and it's more anecdotal from responses that I have anytime I post up anything plastic related or plastic pollution related. We've covered it a number of times over the 10 years of this podcast. I get, people over those 10 years have been like, oh, well, the plastic straw thing, it's ruined everything. And why are we protecting plastic straws? I've even heard some people like, who cares about sea turtles, which, by the way, they're no longer on my friend list and follow list. I mean, sea turtles need to be protected. They are angels in their own little right. But I digress. Has the focus on plastic straws since that that video that went viral where the plastic straw was pulled out of that sea turtle, has it hindered the ability to put through plastic or anti-plastic or plastic policies to handle not only plastic straws but others? Have you found that to happen? Has that been studied or looked at in any kind of way that you know of?
I don't know if there's been any studies. I think like that particular sea turtle that had the
Yeah.
straw in its nose, and I'm sure lots of your listeners have,
Oh yeah.
have seen that or can go
Yeah.
Google it now, right? It had a big impact, right?
Right.
Most people, unlike your ex-friend, do care about sea turtles and do like are concerned about that. So I think that had a really big impact. If we dealt with all the problems of plastic straws and people who moved to reusable straws or people who don't need a straw didn't use a straw, like if we solve that problem, there's still a lot more plastic in the world that we need to address. So
Right.
it's not the big focus of our campaigns. We're
Right.
looking more at the single-use plastic packaging and the plastic
Mm-hmm.
bags and the plastic foam, as this report
Mm-hmm.
shares. So I think it has been really like that sea turtle really good in educating people about that a problem exists. It's not just about the straws. It's about
Yeah. Of
so
course.
much more.
Yeah.
So it is, and I think that's important for people to keep in mind and to know. And we've just got to keep educating people if they think it's been solved because we dealt with the straws or they don't want
Yeah.
to talk about straws anymore. There's a
Right.
whole lot of other single-use plastic that is having an impact on the public's health, on our oceans, on the
Yeah.
marine wildlife. All of those are things that we need to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. I find it interesting that if people keep bringing it up and I'm like, we're still focused on this. Like I call it the gateway plastic, like the gateway drug. Like it's a gateway plastic to really understanding us how our use of single use plastics can affect the environment. I do love how, the plastic foam was the focus of this report. I think breaking it down and really putting into pieces that people can really understand and saying, hey, look, if we take action on this and we reduce this, this could have a really great benefit for our ocean health. With that said, if this does get passed, what can people expect to see with ocean health in terms of like even our own health if this gets out of production?
Yes. Well, so as we were just talking about with the straws, there'll still be more to do. It isn't the
Right,
whole
of course.
problem, but it is an important piece of the problem, and it is
Yeah.
one of the most problematic ones that we should just move on for. I think some of the things we'll see, it's currently one of the most common types of plastic found in beach cleanups in the US, and I believe that's also true in other parts of the world. So we should see a big decrease in that. So that means there's less foam that's ending up on our beaches and in our oceans. There'll be hopefully less plastic foam coffee cups that people are drinking out of. So it won't solve the whole problem, but it will make it
Right.
so that we are using less of this problematic chemical called styrene, that the little bits and pieces of plastic foam are not breaking up and ending up in our on our coasts, on the beaches, in our waterways, and that animals then are ingesting it and either choking on it or just
Yeah.
taking those chemicals through their bodies. So it will make a big impact, and it should be a good first important step for the US to do in terms of national policy. There definitely will be more to do.
Yeah.
And we can look to the states and to other countries to see what else to do, but it is a good, important first step that will have an impact on the amount of plastic going into our oceans and that the plastic that we're being exposed to.
Awesome. Good to know. Now, if my audience is they're ready, they're hyped, they want to help. They always ask, Andrew, how can I help? How can I help with this like piece of legislation or policy to get through, or how can I help with this campaign? So, this is your chance. Talk directly to the audience and be like, how can they help with this specific campaign for Oceana?
Great. I love that question because there's lots of things that folks can do to help. The biggest thing for folks in the US who are concerned about this issue can do is talk to your members of Congress. Tell them about the problem of plastic foam. Tell them about the impacts on the oceans and the marine life and human health, and ask them to support the bill, which is called the Farewell to Foam Act. Really straightforward, phases
Mm-hmm.
out the single-use plastic foam, and we need more supporters, and we need more Democrats and more Republicans to support
Yeah.
the bill. So that's a great thing that people in the US could do. If your member of Congress is already on board with that, talk to your state and local officials too about how they can get involved. And in Canada, it seems like more work to do there too, but you guys are on the
Absolutely.
on the way, which is really good.
Absolutely. We have a little bit of a pipeline problem these days, but that's a different issue and something that we have to address in the long term. But our plastics, I'm very pleased that we were able to come up with like our government was able to come up with that in good time. Like it was really nice. It was definitely needed, and hopefully that can be expanded upon and made even more prolific throughout the thing. We see more changes. So I mean, it's once it's done and it's in effect, it's really nice to see the alternatives start to come out and businesses be happy about it and stuff. And I really look forward to seeing that in the U.S. as well when we visit. So, Christy,
Me,
thank you.
me too.
Yeah, exactly, right. But I just
I
want to
look
say,
forward to
Christy,
sharing that with you. Yep.
yes, we'll have you back on to kind of give us an update on this policy and see where it went and how we can help in other ways and so forth. My audience is your audience, so just let us know what we can do, because that's what we want to do. We want to help. So, Christy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing this with us. It's something that's extremely important to me. I'm sure it's extremely important to the people listening to this episode, and we really appreciate the help and the work that you and Oceana have done over the years and continue to do now and in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Christy, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am going to put the link for everybody who listened to this to the report in the show notes. So you can get access to that very quickly. Highly recommend that you do it. It's very easy read, lots of pictures, lots of cool writings, and just kind of a call to action, quick facts, so forth. It's really great. I think everybody should be reading something like this. Even looking at these little styrofoam pellets and how much they look like eggs and how much they can be eaten or look like food, and they can be eaten by seabirds, sea turtles, marine mammals such as seals and sea lions and dolphins and orcas, of all different fish, just all different sharks, all different types of animals in the sea, but also on land. So it's something that's very hazardous. It's hazardous to us. We know that for sure. Leaches out chemicals, and there's no need for them anymore with all the different types of alternatives. So check out the call to action. Do what you can. Any kind of questions that you have, you can contact me. You can go to speakupforbblue.com/contact, and it goes right to my personal email. You can also go to Join the Undertow. That's at speakupforblue.com/join the undertow to be guided to look at how we can help more of these campaigns in the future and help Oceana out and help Christy out and her colleagues and their partners, of course. But this is not the last you'll hear from Oceana. We have a couple of other interviews lined up with different aspects of their responsibilities and of their programs, and I can't wait to bring those to you, as well as updates to this campaign. So I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.